All right. Whatever.
Are we recording?
Yes, sir.
Welcome, everyone, to the Rink Rat Report podcast. This is an odd one. We're recording on a different platform this time, so it looks different. I'm looking into the camera and it feels odd and it feels different, but nothing is really different. So, anyways, joined by Jason as always.
How's it going? We're officially in the dog days of the NHL offseason. Free agency's
We're in the
done.
doggiest days of all of sports right now.
Oh, yeah. No
This is
sports
one
on.
of the two days where there are no sports.
Yeah.
Is
Baseball.
there MLS even?
I think there was MLS today. There's there's Wimbledon. Still some sports if you like sports. But, I mean, if you like any of the big four major sports in North America, you are clawing your eyes out right now trying to figure out what to watch on TV. If anyone needs some TV suggestions, The Bear Season 2 has been fantastic. Go watch The Bear if you haven't seen that show. It's a great TV show. Or Jury Duty, also a good TV show.
Isn't that one about like a cook though? There's no
Yes.
bears actually in it.
No bears. The cook is named Bear, last name Bear, or like nickname. Anyways, but
Ethan Bear's in a free
Ethan
agent.
Bear, yes, he actually cameos in the second season. I made that up. But anyways, I don't even know where we're going with this.
You know, Ethan Bear actually cooked himself by getting injured at the World Championship. So it's very unfortunate for him.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, dog days of summer. Not a lot to talk about, so we're gonna be grasping at straws today, but still shaping up to be a pretty good episode, I think, because I think biggest thing we're doing here that I think is like going to be a good exercise moving forward is we're going to take a look at the division and see what like the teams. Mind you, there's still a bunch of moving pieces. Like players still need to sign, RFAs need to sign. There might be a bunch of trades we don't know, but right now, as it stands, we're going to take a look at this division and see how the Leafs shape up because there's been a lot of moving pieces here. But before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that listen, guys, 99% of you watching on YouTube you're not subscribed, so just do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, and goal for next episode is to change that number to 98. It's not hard. One person has 1, 2, 3, 4 people have to subscribe. That's it. A couple people have subscribed. We appreciate it, but again, we're trying to grow this thing on YouTube, and we have a fun announcement coming next week. So, yeah, if you want to do us a favor, hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out, and then also hit that like button because you like this stuff. You keep watching it. This is your second. If you watched another episode before and you watch this one, that means you like it. So just hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We appreciate it. And then drop a comment after the end of the video. Just let us know your thoughts on if you thought I said something stupid or if you thought we said something smart. Let us know and we'll respond to it. So yeah, without further ado, just a quick, maybe let's call it like a rundown of what we're going to talk about today. I already mentioned how the division shakes out, like what the Atlantic division is going to look like. We're going to also touch on a Nylander slight contract update because the DeBrincat trade has a lot to do with the William Nylander contract and the potential William Nylander trade and what we might expect in return for William Nylander if he is traded. And then finally, we're going to touch on Ilya Samsonov because his his arbitration is July 21st, which is next week, Friday. So starting things off with the Nylander contract update, let's first touch on DeBrincat here because DeBrincat was just traded for Dominic Kubalik to the Detroit Red Wings for Dominic Kubalik, who they just signed last year. Donovan Sebrango,
who played for the Canadian World Juniors 1 or 2 years ago.
Yeah, like where would he rank as a prospect? Like a B-level prospect, A-level prospect? Like he's a former third-round pick.
Some Red Wings people were kind of hyping him up, saying, "Oh, he played in the ECHL because they had so many guys. They wanted to keep giving him games and minutes and such." Because he did play 23 ECHL games, but some people said they seemed to like him. I don't think there's much of an offensive upside there, but they were saying good defensive defenseman. So I don't know. Let's see what he can do in Belleville.
Yeah, he's probably a couple of years away if he's still in the ECHL. But then they also got a first-round pick, which is probably going to be Boston's first-round pick next year, which is oof, and a fourth-round pick. So I mean, first of all, before we even touch on how this relates,
it's the lower. They get to pick. Between theirs and Boston's I think there is there's another part to the condition where it could be someone's pick unprotected next year.
That's if Boston it finishes in the top 10 because then they would swap and send their 2025 pick to Detroit, and then Detroit would then have to send Ottawa one of the 2025 Boston unprotected pick or their own 2025 first. So it's like the lower of the Is it the lower of the two?
Yeah.
No,
It's not
Detroit.
higher, for
Detroit.
sure.
No, it's Detroit has the option to send their own
Yeah.
or Boston. So it's Detroit's pick.
So they get to pick, but
Yeah. So they're
why
odd.
would you?
Yeah.
Why
There's
would you pick up? We're picking 10. We're picking 15, and Boston's picking 13. We'll send you Boston's.
Yeah, based on the balance of probabilities, though, Boston is probably going to finish higher in the standings than Detroit. I would have to say. I'm going to go out on a limb here and
We'll get
say
into that.
Yeah, we will
We'll
get into
that
that
later.
But yeah, so I mean, oof on this entire saga, right? Like,
how many years did DeBrincat get?
Oh yeah, I forgot about the signing. He also he
signed as well, which was most important because he was qualified. He was not signed though. And the big thing was, if you're going to trade him, it has to be to a team that wants to sign him, because why are you going to trade for him for 1 year? His qualifying offer is like $9 million, and then he walks to free agency.
So,
and it seemed like the only team he wanted to sign with longish term was the Detroit Red Wings, where he's from that area.
So he signed a $7.875 million deal for 4 years. So again, continuing that trend we saw in free agency, players taking shorter term and kind of anticipating the cap going up so they can make more money. I mean, he's going to be 29 when this contract expires. So he'll be able to cash in one more time as a player. But I mean, just in general, like, are you underwhelmed? Like, I think it's fair to say I'm underwhelmed with this return. Are you underwhelmed with this return? It's like, it's incredibly low. And like, what a weird saga this was, right? Trading. I know we're going to tie this all back to Nylander in a second, but like, kudos to them for making that push and trading for him last year, but you give the 7th overall pick for him plus.
So the trade to get him was he had 1 year on his contract, and then he was still an RFA after that contract. The trade to get him was the 7th overall pick from last year, a 2nd round pick, which was still pretty high, and I believe a 3rd round pick too, something like that.
Yeah, I think it was like a 2020. It was a future 3rd round pick, but it was the 1st and 2nd in that draft from Ottawa, who was picking high up in the draft. So you gave up a lot of draft capital for DeBrincat, and
it's high, and now you're getting back a 1st round pick, but it's the lower of 2 1st round picks, right? We don't know. That could, again, it could be like the Duchesne trade way back with Ottawa, where Ottawa ended up having to trade the 4th overall pick for Matt Duchesne kind of thing.
True.
We don't know. Like, this is all probabilities you're basing it on. You're basing it on current expected value. So if it ends up being the 1st overall pick in a year, it can't retroactively go back and say, oh, no, well, Ottawa won that DeBrincat trade. No, you can't say that at all. So in terms of what you were saying, yeah, I think Ottawa didn't get very good value from it. Kubalik is like a depth-ish scorer. He can put up 20 goals, but the rest of his game is not very well defined, I would say. Sabrango is a lower-ish prospect. I mean, tough to give him a B level. I would say he's a C level prospect right now, C minus-ish, whatever. He'll be in the AHL next year. And then, that 1st round pick, it feels very underwhelming. And like, you look at it, DeBrincat went from 40 goals to 27, playing away from Patrick Kane. Well, this year, when you look at it, he did get pretty unlucky. Like, he's still got a fantastic shot. He's a really good scorer, and he's a really good scorer off the rush too, which is huge because I don't believe that the Red Wings are very good at scoring off the rush. So that'll be big for them. But that shot is fantastic and can beat goaltenders from the perimeter. So a little bit perplexing. They got him at a good number too. I really like that as well. So good on the Red Wings there.
Yeah, and the number is the biggest thing here, right? Like, we're looking to tie this obviously back to the Leafs. How does this relate to the Leafs? We're a Leafs-related podcast, obviously, right? But the whole world wants to know how this affects the Leafs.
Well, the Leafs are the most important team in the league.
Of course. So
remember that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say DeBrincat and Nylander are pretty similar. I think Nylander gets a slight edge, but I think people underrate how good DeBrincat has been over the past couple of years. Like, if we're going to talk about like minutes allocation and things like that, like, Nylander would generally get, again, I don't know what type of minutes DeBrincat got in Ottawa, but Nylander generally gets the easier minutes compared to top line players around the league, right? So if we take that into account, like, it's like DeBrincat is putting up similar amount of points to him. He's scoring more goals than him. He's a better raw natural shooting talent than him. And I mean, I view them as very similar players. I would have been interested in like a DeBrincat for Nylander swap if he was willing to take less money. But the biggest thing here is that the rumors that have been mentioned of William Nylander and what his ask is is it's $10 million. I just don't see how a $3 million difference between Alex DeBrincat and William Nylander. I just simply cannot wrap my head around that.
Yeah. I mean, DeBrincat this past season was playing 19 minutes a game in Chicago, where, they weren't playing the best hockey. He was getting 20-ish minutes.
Yeah.
In Chicago, he was getting 20 minutes. In Ottawa, he was getting 19.
Oh, okay.
But the second half of the season when in Ottawa, like he didn't have many goals, I don't believe, and he was just really, really unlucky, which it happens. It happens. I mean, his shooting percentage went from 20 2 seasons ago to 15 last season to 10% this season, right? And he's a career overall 14% shooter. So, I mean, but in terms of what you were mentioning, comparing DeBrincat to Nylander, I think there are a lot of similarities. I mean, again, DeBrincat's a fantastic skater, can shoot the puck really well. In terms of goal scoring ability, probably have maybe they're both similar, I would say. I think Nylander's a better playmaker than him. As you mentioned earlier, I would give Nylander the edge over DeBrincat. I did have a Senators fan tell me, if you were to compare Nylander to DeBrincat, if DeBrincat were to be an $8 million player, he would say that Nylander would be a $9 million player. So if Nylander were to be given a 4-year deal like DeBrincat was, I think it probably would be close-ish to 9, right?
I think that does make sense, but it sounds like also he wants that term, which is, I think, going to be the biggest stepping stone here. And that's like, I mean, I've been DMing Kevin a bit, just talking about that kind of stuff, and it scares us. It scares me, man. Like that, like Nylander he's a year old. We have to add in the fact that he is a year older than DeBrincat as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you look at past seasons like this, for like looking at this from DeBrincat's from a DeBrincat point of view, this season, based on his previous seasons, looks to be more of an outlier season where he didn't perform as well. I think that's going to be fair to say. Like you said, he got very unlucky. But then with William Nylander, he had a fantastic season. But is this his peak? Like I don't know. He's still only 26. So I mean, there's definitely room to top out and for him to still.
In the past 2 seasons, when you look at it, like he ran hot. Not this past season, the season before, he ran hot. He was a point a game, but there was points where he was playing with David Kampf, which really did not help him. And then there was points where, like at 5-on-5, his production was pretty pedestrian for certain stretches. I will add, for certain stretches, it was not very good. Then this past season, you look at it for I want to say a decent amount of time. He was up there in terms of the league points totals. He was well over a point a game. And then, again, got put back with Tavares, kind of slowed down a good amount, and then picked it back up at the end of the season there. I believe so. He might have. He may not have. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. But there were some pretty elongated, like not like, oh, he's getting unlucky. Oh, the puck's just not going in. Where it was like, looks a little sluggish.
Yeah, and I see exactly what you're saying there, because William Nylander is like, I mean, listen, I'm not trying to say he's a bad player, but I just think like 10 is a lot to ask for. And like, again, for me, that's tough to stomach. I don't know if I have much more to contribute on this situation. I guess actually there is one more thing I want to talk about, because I kind of heard this on the radio, kind of like scoffed at it. But then after thinking about it a little bit more, I'm like, they might have a point here. Like, do you think that the Matthews deal is like done? And they're waiting to announce that, like waiting for Nylander, kind of the Nylander domino to fall to announce that, where it's just because like they don't want it to be considered a comparable. Is that like something that you could see? Because I think I was like, that's dumb. But then now that I think about it, I'm like, that actually could make sense. Right? Because and not just from the sense of like, oh, Leafs players overpaid, blah, blah, blah. Like, I mean,
it's a country club. They just want to announce it together, and they're going to hold hands. And exactly. Be like they're actually going to announce it at the golf course.
Yeah, but still, if he, like, let's say he gets a max deal, like, then that, I mean, we don't know what his deal is going to be, but that sets kind of the bar, because Nylander is below Matthews, right? He's going to be in that range between Matthews and DeBrincat. So where in that range does he fall? I don't know, but I think Matthews does set that top bar this year. No, of course. But Matthews sets that top bar to be compared to other players moving forward. So Do you think that like makes sense?
Logically, it kind of does, simply because like it's gone completely quiet. All we hear about is, oh, Nylander came back to the table and he said he wanted 10, but the Leafs view him as an 8. And from Elliot Friedman, I think now especially, um, like now especially because like the 32 Thoughts podcast is off for the summer. Like everyone seems to be off for the summer except for Frank Saravelli, who like seems to hate the Leafs. So we don't know what actually is coming out of his mouth. Like everyone's off for the summer now, and neither of the deals are done. So it's like all we can do is speculate. Like, I don't know. I mean, it logically does make sense though that one of the deals is done. They're trying to work and get the other one done before they announce it, and they're just going to announce both of them at the same time. Like
That's mostly
right?
the angle I'm like looking at it at, and I think that, I mean, to me that makes sense. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know.
So then you can't use. So then Nylander can't use Matthews as a negotiation piece or whatever.
Exactly, that's the biggest thing, right? It's
Right.
the agent who's doing that. So and
I
if you're a
mean,
smart
for all we know, Nylander's deal could be done, and Matthews is the one that's
holding it up,
bargaining. Yeah.
maybe, who knows? Honestly, we have no
For all
idea,
we
no
know,
insight.
right? I don't know.
Exactly.
Before we get into our next segment, we want to give our shout out to today's sponsor, Manscaped. If you haven't heard already, it's smooth sack summer. When you're playing in the summer sun, make sure you're scaped from pubes to bum. That's right, this is the summer to keep your balls cool while still looking hot with Manscaped. The leaders in the below the waist grooming are making sure we all have a ball this summer by giving our pants partners everything they need to stay fresh. Dive headfirst into smooth sack summer by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with the promo code RINKRAT. That is RINKRAT. Now back to the show.
So
You're sitting here guessing.
moving on from there, we got a little bit of a messy hairdo got going on here. We got Ilya Samsonov, right? His qualifying offer, we just qualified. We qualified him earlier on in July 6th. No, July 21st. Yes, July 21st. Sorry, Friday, July 21st. I mean, he's one of the first. Good for us because he's one of the first guys we'll get to hear from. So either a deal gets done within the next week, or we're going to be like watching closely on this arbitration hearing here. So we kind of put together. I mean, there wasn't many comparables, but Joe, you put together a couple of comparables for Samsonov potentially that we could be looking at. So what did you find there?
I mean, I did my best simply because there are not a lot of RFA goaltenders that, like, you know, that go to, I don't know, that have started the number of games that he has. Like, I'm trying to look at deals that were signed while the goalie was an RFA, where they actually have like a decent sample size. And it's like, oh, Vasilevsky's deal. Oh, okay, thanks. Sorokin's deal. Oh, okay, thanks. All the top goalies in the league. John Gibson was another one in there too. I'm like, I can't compare Samsonov to that. So then I was able to find one though, and it was interesting. It was Tristan Jarry after his like first official season as the backup in Pittsburgh. He had like 20 some odd games 2 seasons before that, finished with a 908, but then was back in the minors or was injured. I actually can't remember the next season. But then the season after that, it was the year that COVID shut everything down, and then they had to finish the year in the bubble. He had a 921 with 30 some odd games played, and that's when he was in tandem with Matt Murray. And after that season, he played one playoff game. He had a 921, 30 some odd games played, I think on 50 ish, maybe career games played. And he signed for $3.5 million for 3 years. In today's cap number, because the cap actually hasn't gone up that much since, I believe, Jason, we ran the numbers. What number did we get? Damn it.
It was 3.8, I think. It was around 3.8.
3.8,
So
around
yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And when we
3.8,
were
3.9.
logically going through it, we're like, okay, Samsonov had a bit of a better resume than what Jarry had. He had a 919 this season, 42 games played, more games played before that, 9 playoff games, won a series as well with the Leafs. Played pretty well in that series, I would add too. Well, a little up and down. That 6-goal game or 7-goal game will affect your numbers in a small sample size. Keep that in mind.
Good for us. Good for us, right?
Yeah, I guess so. And so, like, if Jari got 3.8 in today's numbers by 3 years, like, that's where I think Samsonov will creep into the 4s for sure. Like, I did say Husso a few episodes ago, and then someone corrected me and said, well, that was a UFA deal. So that actually does matter. Then you look at it, Nedeljkovic got 2 years, or Nedeljkovic was with Detroit. He was an RFA, and he signed for 2 years, $3 million per. So that's another comparable. I mean, Samsonov, again, had more games played, better playoff resume, all of that. So he deserves more than 3 million, I would say. Mm-hmm. Like, it's there's not a lot of guys to compare him to, especially when you only look at RFA signings, which is going to matter. So it makes the deal different, but I think it's going to go in the 4s, and it's probably not going to be for too long, I would imagine, right?
Yeah. And I mean, when we talked about this earlier, if I had the choice, I don't know if I would like re-up him on that. Like, and I would look to move him, honestly, just because that's just.
And then you'd run Brian Elliott as your backup?
Sure, why not? But it just seems a little rich for. It just seems a little rich.
You can do short term. I think it's fine.
Yeah. Maybe on a 1-year deal. Maybe honestly on a 2-year deal, it actually could work because again,
fine.
Then you have a tandem that makes less than $5 million, which is very valuable, right? So maybe that's where it works.
Out about 5.
Yeah, I mean, if he exceeds 4.3, I think he's getting moved, honestly, because I don't know how.
Why 4.3?
Because doesn't Joseph Woll make
7.76 or something like that?
Yeah, so.
Oh, come on.
I don't want it to exceed 5.
I think under 4.5 short term is fine.
Okay, fair enough.
In my opinion.
Yeah,
I think the Leafs defense really did help Samsonov this year a lot. He's a very swimmy goaltender that can, if the puck gets moving around quickly, he can get out of position. And once he gets out of position once, you'll see it the next play, the next play, the next play, the next play. And we saw that more than a few times. But yeah, that's where I think short term, he's going to get in the 4s for sure, though, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If the number comes out 5, I'd be pretty surprised.
Yeah, I'm gonna post question of the day. What number would you be happy with? Well, let's do a palatable number for this. Is for the you guys watching. Tweet at us or comment in the YouTube comments down below. What's a palatable number for Ilya Samsonov? Something you'd be happy with if you saw on arbitration day. And then what number?
If you went over, it's a walkaway point.
Yes, I like that. So if it give me a palatable number and then like a number you want, like this is the number that you want him to sign at, not like the max. Yeah. So let's get a max and then like your preferred number. And
so why I mentioned Brian Elliott, Larry Brooks of the New York Post, I think he's a Rangers guy. Anyways, he mentioned that Brian Elliott is linked to the Leafs, and that's why you've seen every single Leafs outlet be like, Brian Elliott to the Leafs? Ugh. I don't know how legitimate this is. Brian Elliott is from Ontario, I believe Ajax area. So maybe he wanted to come home for one last season. At the way things are shaking out right now, he would be the 3rd goaltender, probably with the Marlies. Didn't have the greatest season with Tampa.
No. You know what? I gave Matt Murray way too much credit there. The third.
No, I forgot we have to give.
He still exists. Like what?
Anyways, he had a tough year. Obviously, he had a good year the year before, and then a tough year this year. I feel like every game that I saw that Tampa got shelled like 7-1, and it just was never a hockey game, especially in the latter half of the season where they had a bit of a tough go. It turned out it was Brian Elliott in net, and just there was a deflated Tampa Bay team in front of him. So. Like when you're only playing like 20 games a year and 3 of them have the number 7 in the goals against column, obviously your numbers are not going to be very good. Probably has a little bit of game left, especially if it's the 3rd goalie and we're not relying on him to be a starter. So I'd be all right with it. An interesting story that someone told me, another goalie who I played with a few times, he was saying that he tried out for a AAA team once, and like he was supposed to be one of the goalies. Like he played very well. They're like, we want you. And then it was just a matter of every other goalie at the tryout, they had to pick one more. And he said there was this goalie at the other end who stopped legitimately everything, let in one goal like all tryouts. He said it was the most ridiculous thing ever he had ever seen. And this was his U16 season, so his OHL draft year. He's like, this goalie was incredible. And he's like, they didn't end up going with him because they wanted a big goalie. Obviously, shocker. Hockey scouts wanting a big goalie. But he said he took note of the name, and he was like, I want to see where this guy ends up, how things shake out for this guy. Guy's name, Brian Elliott.
Wow.
Not bad.
Not bad. Big
Not
miss
bad.
for that scout there. But
shocker.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, that pretty much wraps. You have anything else to mention with this Samsonov stuff? I mean, what the heck are we going to do with Matt Murray? I don't know. Hopefully this trade happens like mid-August so we can push out some more content, because I mean, we're like looking at what we're going to do over the summer, and there's
the top 5 Matt Murray moments.
Top 5. I'm down for that. I mean, hey, we're on video now, so we can do that. But yeah, so let's move off there and kind of get in the meat and potatoes of this episode. Like we should. I think you came up with this idea, and I think it's a really good idea. But it's basically just an early look at like what the Atlantic Division looks like, right?
Yeah, a lot of changes happen.
A ton of change, right? Especially like with the high end teams, like we saw the Lightning, Florida Panthers, and Boston Bruins. Like they've lost some key pieces that we know of right now. Like we don't know what's going to happen with Bergeron, Krejci, right? Like we don't know what's going to happen with those guys. They might come back for Boston, and if they do, that's massive. If they don't, I mean, that's a big hole you got to fill, right? And then, yeah, if you look at other places like Lightning lost a few players, Florida had a lot of roster turnover. Yeah. And then, I mean, I would say
we'll get into it in detail. Let's take a look.
Exactly. Yeah, the bottom half of the division got a little bit better. So yeah, like starting with let's start with the bottom and kind of move up, because at the bottom you got the Montreal Canadiens, and they're basically like, I mean,
can we just pass?
We could just pass over. They got Alex Duhook. They have $6 million in cap space, so maybe they're a team that could potentially take on Matt Murray. But other than that, like I don't know what else.
They have 2 goalies. They want they like Montembeault. People are happy with the way he played at the World Championships. I know that sounds crazy, but like, I guess it's something. A lot of guys actually this year for the World Championships actually went over as like a tryout, and so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So
worked out for some. And unfortunately, then you get your Ethan Bear injury, and that just really, really sucks.
Exactly.
Sucks to see. Hopefully he can rebound.
One thing I'm going to add here, though, I didn't mention it with the Canadiens. I'll just mention it right now. They're 200-1 to win the division. And I think this will give us like a better understanding of like what the betting markets at least think. Mind you, these are low limit markets, so there's not going to be that reflective of like what everyone thinks. But yeah, it's just good to know where they have them placed. So Canadiens like literally snowball chance in hell, 200-1 to win the to win the Atlantic here. But moving on from the Habs, we got the Red Wings, who are 14-1 to win the division, and that actually shocked me as the seventh place team in the division. Like basically the 7th best odds to win, which doesn't really make sense to me, right? Because I thought they made some really good moves. First of all, we talked about the Alex DeBrincat trade. That was fantastic for them. JT Compher, although he's a trap, I mean, that still helps out their forward group, right? I mean, we cannot like the cap efficiency in the contract, but we can still think that he helps improve their team, their team two-way. They got Shane Gostisbehere. I mean, they added James Reimer as a backup. We'll see how that plays out. Justin Hall, a little bit of a questionable ad, but we've seen him. He can play top 4 minutes. Like, he's not the worst. Like, if you have him in a 5-6 role, I don't think he's too bad. They also added Klim Kostin, who some people are actually rather, I don't want to say high on, but for a bottom 6 player, I think are relatively high on for in the bottom 6. They lost Kieson, Hag, and Nedeljkovic, so they didn't really lose too many key pieces. And they have around $8 million in cap space, I believe. Let me just double check that. But like, what are your thoughts on the Red Wings this year? Because I could see them as a team, like, I don't see them finishing 7th in the division here. I think they could creep their way up and potentially flirt, let's say halfway through the season, flirt in that like 10th, 9th place in the conference. I think they have like a chance to flirt with like the wild card maybe.
Yeah, I think they definitely improved. And I mean, your point on Compher is correct at the end of the day. Like, he is better than what they had down the middle last year, right? Like, although he's penciled in at 2C, I don't think he's a 2C at all. They still do have Andrew Kopp, who on Daily Faceoff is penciled in as their 3C. So it's like, okay, well, that's like, I don't know.
Like a
Both
give and
are
take.
not
Good
quite
3C,
two
bad 2.
C's, but it's like
Exactly.
whatever. Yeah, it's better. I think they're definitely a better team than last year. I look at the second pairing of Gostisbehere and Hall, and it's like you'd rather that be more of a sheltered third pairing. And then you
Mm.
look at their third pairing, though, and it's Ben Sherratt and Oli Mata, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, that's another meh. But I mean, Jake Wallman, Mort Seider. Mort Seider is a young defenseman who is still taking steps. He seemed to work very well with Jake Wallman last year.
Yep.
And I mean, I was very impressed with Jake Wallman. And they started Seider at the beginning of the year with Sherratt, and it just did not work. And that's why Seider had such a tough start to the season. So now a full season of Jake Wallman and Moritz Seider, that could be very encouraging. But the high end scoring talent isn't quite there yet. I guess DraftKings is looking at the fact that, like, how many of these guys are over a point a game? None.
Yeah.
Is this a solid defensive team?
Not really.
No, not at all. In my opinion, not at all.
Yeah.
Right? Like their goaltending is okay. I'm lukewarm on Ville Husso. I think he's a decent goaltender, right? So you don't have that high upside offense. Daniel Sprong's a decent ad. Like they made some decent ads. DeBrincat, okay, great. Sprong, decent ad. Kubalik is whatever they have, and then like Comfer is better than what they had, right? So I think that they will improve. I don't think they're quite there yet. And
Fair
their
enough.
best bet is that DeBrincat's back to a 40 goal scorer, and that
Yep.
Lucas Raymond takes that extra step because he didn't quite take that next step this year, right? So some question marks, but that's ultimately why they're at the bottom, is that like the guys they have on the roster are all like, oh, this guy looked okay in a depth spot last year. There's not a lot of guys where it was like, there's like one guy they brought in that was like, oh, he actually had his worst season in the past 3 seasons last year. So, that's where they're way down there. But I like, again, I think that them being that low is not a testament to like, oh, they're going to be terrible next year. They'll be competitive. I think they will be competitive and will do as you said. However, the rest of the Atlantic is very interesting.
Yes, that's very true. And that kind of one thing I want to touch on before we move off the Red Wings here. They do have around, oh my gosh, I lost the number here, $8 million in cap space. And that's just kind of like a trend we're going to be seeing with the other teams in this division. They only have Joe Veleno to sign, and they have 11 forwards on their books right now. So they have space to. I mean, Veleno, don't expect him to get like anything near 8, obviously. So they're gonna have like probably $5 to $7 million to spend on more on some more players here. So again, this is why we're just doing this early, just as an exercise. But this could potentially be a team that might be after like a guy like, I don't know, Patrick Kane, or they've made it very clear that they want that Steve Yzerman wants this team to do better and at least compete or flirt with competing, right? Because they've kind of been in a dead zone the past couple of years. So they're looking to kind of move past that. So
that's what's going to help to develop your prospects.
Exactly.
Is not being total dog shit.
That's a good point. So moving on from the Red Wings, who are 14-1, we have the Senators, who are 11-1. And this is the team that I was kind of mentioning, where I feel like the Red Wings and Senators should kind of be flipped. Maybe that's just how I'm more bullish on the Red Wings roster, and I just don't respect the Senators that much. But I mean, they lost DeBrincat. That has to count for something, right? They essentially lost DeBrincat and lost Cam Talbot, but they added Dominic Kubalik, who, I mean, listen, that's not that great of ad, and they added Jonas Korpisalo. I know you like Jonas Korpisalo, but to me, I mean, he's kind of similar to Cam Talbot in the sense that they are very volatile, right? They've had very volatile. Very
the Red Wing the what's it called? The Senators' disrespect seems real here. I had to call in someone to hype up the Senators in this section. Dave, can you hear him?
Can't really hear him here.
Can you hear him now? Dave, go.
You guys are chatting some slander about the Sens?
Like slight slander, yeah. I just think that 11-1 is a little sweet for them. I think they should be closer to like what like behind the Red Wings. I don't know.
Yeah, he said Red Wings over Senators for this next season.
Who said that?
Jason did.
No, that's ridiculous. There's no way the Red Wings. There's no way the Red Wings roster is so much softer than the Sens.
You guys think you have that DJ grit that's going to take you over the top?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think it's playoffs this year for the Sens. I'm predicting. I'll tell you what is my prediction right here. I'm predicting 95 points. Last year, I think we finished with 86, so that's an additional 4 wins and an additional overtime win. And I think our roster is way stronger this year than it was last year. I mean, even if we lost to DeBrincat, who cares? Like Norris, we had him for 8 games last year. So we lost to DeBrincat. We replaced him with Norris. I think that's almost identical. DeBrincat had 27 goals last year. I don't even know how many of those were actually in. I think 12 of them were in actual even strength. So I think that right there's a wash. And then if you think of it, we got Kubalik, who scored 30 goals. In his first season in the league? Last year he had 20 goals. So I think we have more depth up front.
This guy's talking pre-pandemic.
Yeah, whatever. He had 20 goals last year. He had 20 goals last year. So whatever. I think we have more depth up front, and then now we have a full season of Chikrin. If he stays healthy.
That's a pretty big if.
That's a big ad.
I'm not gonna. But I think our D's pretty damn strong.
Okay.
Chikrin, we're gonna have him for the whole season now, and Sanderson's he's getting older. So he's getting more familiar with the game, with the league, and he's gonna keep getting stronger. And then we got Korpisalo in net now. Last year, for the longest stretch, we had friggin' Matt Sogard in net. The guy had no experience at all, and we're only 6 points out of a playoff spot last year.
Ish, yeah. You got to give Dave credit, because when we did our contenders and pretenders, I actually called him. I was like, "Hey, should I include Ottawa?" And he actually told me, he's like, "Probably not." And he thought that our call was going to be on the episode, and I just axed it because it was so mid.
Yeah, I was pretty close last year. Yeah, I think I predicted 85. I think I predicted 85 points, and they finished with 86. So I'm thinking 95 this year. I think they can get an additional 9 points from last year. It's November. The thing is, we always shit the bed in November. I think last year we had 2 or 3 wins in November. So
I think it was 3.
Yeah, it might have been 3. So if we're able to go at least 500 in November and then play pretty strong the rest of the year like we did in the past, I think we could potentially slip in.
Okay.
Who knows who else we add? I don't know who else. We might add somebody, right? I'm not really big on getting Tarasenko, to be honest with you. I don't think we have the cap space to even get him. I'm feeling if we can get Tatar up front, I think we're a playoff team for sure.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Dave.
Well, Detroit's definitely not better than the Sens, so I don't know. I don't know what the argument there is. I got to listen to this episode and hear what you guys are saying on that, but I don't agree with that at all.
Fair enough.
All right. Thanks, bud. Have a good sleep.
All right. See you guys.
Right.
Bye.
Had to. He was hyping up the Sens hard today. I'm like, I'll give him a call.
Fair enough, but I agree with his points, but I just don't I don't think the team will be as good as he thinks he is behind with Korpisalo in net. There
are injury concerns too.
Of course, that's another problem, is that you have an injury. But again, I'm never going to be the guy to be like, this team will do well unless they get injured, because injuries can happen to literally anyone. But at the same time, you're right, they do have more injury prone players. I think the biggest thing he's missing is that Drake Batherson might not be playing for them next year with the Team Canada thing. We don't know what's going to happen there. That's a big. Who knows?
We'll see. I have no idea.
Listen, their D is pretty good, but the problem is that they're very strong offensively. Jacob Chikrin has a pretty decent two-way game. Eric Brandstrom, also pretty good two-way. It's just I just think that they're more top heavy, and I don't think that they're top heavy guys they're high end guys like Stützle, Tkachuk, Giroux, Shabbat, Chikrin. I don't think they can carry the load enough for this team to win. Right? At the very least, I think that. I don't know. I just have more faith in.
It'll be fun to watch, certainly. I mean, when you look at it,
go ahead.
Josh Norris is still young. Tim Stützle is born in 2002. Shane Pinto is last year was his first full year in the NHL. I think he did as expected there. So it's got some fun players there. Jake Sanderson's also another young player who came onto the scene, seemingly played pretty well last year. I mean, once Anton Forsberg went down, their goaltending situation was a complete mess. I mean, Cam Talbot he's 35, and when you're dealing with injuries at that age, it's tough to come back. And when he came back, it was not very good. And Mads Sjogard, I think, was just not ready for the NHL yet. So that's where they kind of sputtered. But yeah, it'll be an interesting one to watch. I can see the optimism from the Sens faithful. But yeah, like, I mean, the who cares Josh Norris for DeBrincat is a wash.
I don't know about that.
I think that was a little Sens sicko sticking out from Dave there.
Yeah, and I just worry that their bottom six is literally just going to get like destroyed against any other competent team. Like they might have like one of the worst bottom sixes in the league, honestly. So, but maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe like just looking at their roster, it just doesn't look too strong. It depends how they shape out their roster. But I mean, Dave did a good job covering the Sens. I don't really know if I don't really have much else to add here. 11-1 just for 11-1.
Korpisalo, I'm very interested to watch that one. That's one that 2 years prior, all the goalies community will tell you. For 2 years prior to this past season, he had hip issues, and it showed, and he played terrible. This year, he finally got the hip issues cleaned up in the offseason. He came in 100% healthy and looked way, way better. Now, did he get his lunch fed to him by Connor McDavid in the playoffs and Leon Draisaitl? Absolutely. But he's playing in front of a much better team, I would say, than the Columbus Blue Jackets. So I'm very interested to see what he can do. But let's move on.
Yep.
We spent way too much time on a Leafs podcast talking about the Senators. We still play out of the Canadian Fart Center in Canada, Ontario. Let's go. Sabres?
Yeah, Sabres. Yeah. So the Sabres are by far of the bottom. Like this is like the Sabres are just below the line of like good teams, right? Playoff teams. Yeah. In this division, right? I mean, it's a 50-50 split of four really strong teams, 4 very weak teams. The Sabres this last year have made a lot of ground, I think, catching up to those playoff teams. I mean, Tage Thompson was fantastic for them. Like their entire team played really well. The biggest concern for me is that like Eric Comrie, Devin Levi's goalie tandem might be a little iffy, but we'll touch on that in a sec. The two biggest, they added 2 really big pieces in Connor Clifton and Eric Johnson. Those were their biggest acquisitions. So they didn't really add too much there. And they lost Craig Anderson, who's not that much of a loss, but to them actually stole a couple games, right? And they, on top of that, they also have around $6 million cap space. So, I mean, their roster's pretty much shaken out here. They still have a ton of cap space, and a lot of these teams do. No current RFAs to sign. So, I mean, this team can go either way, but yeah, like I
definitely will be fun.
I don't know what to make of this team. Do you think they have a chance to sniff the playoffs here or no?
Yes, I fully do. I like the addition of Connor Clifton. Again, with their defense, like they have Rasmus Dahlin, Mikael Samuelsson, Owen Power, who those are their 3 better defense. And then there's some question marks after that where it's Lyubushkin, who we saw, third pairing guy, I would say. Connor Clifton has traditionally been a third pairing guy, did a very good job at being a third pairing guy, but he was a third pairing guy. Eric Johnson won a Stanley Cup, is not the same age as what he used to be. Yeah. Such as all of us are, I suppose. But I think their biggest issue last year was defense. I saw a lot of things where it was like, would it make sense for the Sabres, who have all this cap space, to go and get Connor Hellebuck? And then I heard, well, no, because Connor Hellebuck doesn't do well with chances where it's moving from side to side. He's not the fleetest of foot. He's better when it's one-on-one, right? And I thought of that and I was like, well, if you're giving up a ton of chances like that, those are the most difficult chances to stop. It doesn't matter who you have in net. You have to shore up your defense if you want to actually be competitive. So they made some cost-effective, well, not cost-effective. They paid a third pairing guy $10 million, but they tried to address it a little bit. Will it help? I think it'll help a little bit. Their goaltending, as you mentioned, like Devin Levi is a young rookie goaltender. It'll be an adventure for him. It's always very difficult for a rookie goaltender to perform well, especially he's like 22, I want to say. Eric Comrie's
21.
Eric Comrie's a decent goaltender. Like, we'll see with him. Apparently, according to ClearSight, like he just got very unlucky with when he was playing in terms of what the roster was in front of him, because his goals saved above expected, I believe, according to the ClearSight, from what I've heard, was positive.
Interesting.
He just got the most amount of games when they were decimated with injuries in front of him, and it was a disaster. And then he had that 10-goal game, which was,
doesn't always help.
That will always do
the
a number for your statistics. We're like 7 of them were in the third period with like 5 minutes left. Yeah. Just mercy rule.
Exactly. And I think the biggest thing here, and like the biggest, I want to say, elephant in the room for the Buffalo Sabres, or Sabre in the room, is Buffalo in the room. I don't know. Anyways, it's that they're going to try and do their best to get Patrick Kane, who's still a free agent, right? Makes a lot of sense. He's from Buffalo. They have $6 million cap space. They have cap space over the next couple of years with a couple RFAs
similar to a lot of their forwards. He doesn't play defense.
Exactly. But hey, like you know how these guys play. It's cocaine out of a
helicopter,
guns, all that. So, I
mentioned the Sabres. Yeah, I didn't even mention. Oh yeah, they have Tage Thompson, who's a complete rock star. They have Jeff Skinner, who can put up points, but as I mentioned, not the best on defense. Like, they have a lot of guys where it's like, this guy could they have, again, similar to the Senators, but more so, I would say, with the Sabres. They have a lot of young guys that have shown a little bit, who you would think would ride the curve up and be a little bit better next season. It's just a matter of how much better will they be. That's to be seen, we'll call it.
Yeah, I'm definitely more bullish on the Sabres young guys than the Senators, obviously, as you can tell by my reaction. So yeah, 9-1 here for the Sabres to win the division. Okay. I don't think they're going to win the division. If you can find playoff prices or like regular season win totals,
I think could be. I'm very curious to what their playoff number is.
Yeah, I could see them around like between plus 300, plus 200, maybe probably a little less than that, maybe. But I would like that. And the regular season win total, I'd probably take like the over on whatever it is, depending on what it is, assuming it's going to be lower than I expect it to be. Anyways, moving on from there, we have.
So to stop you there,
sorry,
those were the teams that did not make the playoffs from the Atlantic last season. In my opinion, they all got better. Like Montreal, I don't know.
They're not a team yet.
Maybe, who knows? I think they maybe did a little bit. But like, as we mentioned, Detroit, are they a playoff team? I'm not sure, but they did get better. They 100% got better. The Senators, I think, will be better than last season as well. How much better is to be seen. The Sabres, I think, are also better than last season, and they were very competitive last season. So this year, the Atlantic will be a lot closer. And now as we get into the teams that did make the playoffs, we're not going to be mentioning how much better each of these teams were from last season, especially at the end of last season, because a lot of these teams lost some players. And get into the first one, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Your thoughts on them?
So the Tampa Bay Lightning, they only had really one big add here. And I want to say they still have a little bit of cap space. Yeah, they have around, I think it's $3 million. Yeah, $299 million in RFA, in cap space. They only have to sign Tanner Jeannot. So maybe that's where that money's getting allocated. But they only really added Connor Sheary. They lost Ross Colton, which I think is a bigger loss than some people think. Because we were high on Ross Colton on this podcast. They lost Alex Killorn, which is a massive loss for them. Similar to like the loss they experienced with Andre Palat last year. They also lost Pat Maroon and Corey Perry, who were a big part of the identity of that fourth line. Mind you, Corey Perry was a lot. Pardon?
So you're missing it. They lost their entire fourth line. Belmar signed in Seattle.
Yes, he did. He did.
But go on. You had a good point.
They lost their identity of the fourth line. And maybe this is like a culture change for the Tampa Bay Lightning here. Maybe they feel like they don't need that veteran fourth line anymore. Maybe it's better for them. I mean, mind you, they signed Luke Glendening, so maybe they still believe in that culture type of fourth line. But they got Alex Barboulay. Like maybe they want like a younger, quicker, more fleet of foot fourth line. I don't know what their angle is here for them, but I mean, 450 plus 450 to win the division here. This might be the worst the Lightning have looked in like the last 3 years, but at the same time, like you mentioned, these teams are going to get worse. They still have Nikita Kucherov. They still have Braden Point. They still have Steven Stamkos. They still have Victor Hedman. They still have Eriksson. They still have Andrei Vasilevsky. They have all the pieces in place to still make a run at the Cup. So do you think having them as, let's call it, the worst of the competitive teams to win the division, do you think that's fair to them?
I mean, you could say there's no numbers really to back it up or whatever. Like, they finally got a full offseason to get healthy. So that is something that is a positive. They did lose some offensive contributors and overall contributors, but as well as they lost those culture contributors, I guess you can call them. I mean, yeah, the fourth line is Cole Koepke, who I don't know if that's Brooks Koepka's long lost cousin, Luke Glendening, and Josh Archibald. It's not that compared to last year, I maybe would take last year's. I don't know. Who cares? It's the fourth line. But as you mentioned, and the most important thing to mention, why they're in a, technically, I guess we'll call it a playoff position right now in terms of these odds that we're looking at, is that they have elite talent. They have an elite goaltender. They have some very, very good defensemen. They have high-end elite offensive players, and that will always win you games, right?
Yeah.
So now it's to be seen, though, like, how is this third line going to perform? They don't have, like, the depth now, the second, third line. It's like they don't have Alex Killorn. They don't have Ross Colton. That's a good amount of points that they tried to only replace with Connor Sheary. And I guess now Tanner Jeannot, hopefully the Tampa Bay Lightning will hope that Tanner Jeannot will take the next step. I don't know why that was so hard to say, but it was. So I still think they're a very good team. I still think they're a playoff team, but that is interesting to see them below the Florida Panthers for sure.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, mind you, they're plus 450 right now. We'll get to the Florida Panthers in a sec. They're only plus 400, so it's not like it's a drastic drop off. No. And I think a lot of why we're seeing that is maybe because when you look at this roster, it's the replacement. I don't want to say replacement level talent, but if anyone in the top six gets hurt, then they'll probably be struggling. I don't want to say struggling for a little bit, but they don't have that bottom six depth that can jump up and replace that like they would have in the past, like the Ross Colton or mostly Ross Colton, Killorn, Palatz of those
Hagel.
Kinds of guys who are
like
Hagel,
like,
exactly.
When I was looking at it, I'm like, first line, like just on what daily faceoff listed, whether they go with this or not, I don't know. But the first line, I was like, wow, Kucherov, Point, Stamkos, that's a first line. Then the second line, I was going Brandon Hagel, Anthony Cirelli. I was like, wow, that's also pretty solid there too. They both had very good seasons last year. Well, Cirelli was coming back from injury, so he's a very good player in my opinion still. But then the right wing on the second line was Connor Sheary. I'm like, it's a good ad if he's a depth one. And then the third line was Nick Paul, he's been there obviously, Asimont, and Tanner Jeannot. I'm like, okay. So they don't quite have that depth that they used to. They still have high-end talent, but the depth is, I would say, not as good as what it used to be. But I am very surprised that they're below Florida, in my opinion.
Yeah. Only by a little bit, but yeah, I feel like we touched on everything we really could with this Tampa Bay roster. We've seen them do it before, and we'll see them do it again. But right now, the way it's looking, they could be. I'm curious to see what the playoff odds are, because I think that they'll be a team that's closer to that'd be close to make or miss, be very, very close, probably like around the 150 to make. And I would hammer that in a heartbeat, because I still think this Tampa Bay Lightning team makes the playoffs. Now, do they win the division? I don't know if they have the longevity of the roster longevity and the roster depth if an injury were to occur to have other players to step up and do that. So I would probably pass on them leading the division right now. So moving on from the Lightning, though, we're going to look at the Florida Panthers, who are plus 400 to win the division. And they made a lot of key adds, but they also lost some players, starting with Anthony Duclair, who I think is a pretty big loss. But mind you, he had he had injury concerns, and that's definitely something that depending on how he recovers from those injuries, he played in the playoffs, but he didn't really look as good as he looked before. It could be it's a knee injury, so it would affect his speed. So maybe this is a smart move of them getting ahead of the 8 ball here. They also lost 2 big D in Radko Gudas and Mark Stahl. Big, I mean in the literal sense. But
Gudas is a solid third pairing guy, but $4
Gudas is a
million.
solid third pairing D. Mark Stahl was like
Anaheim
got
just threw
it's
some
crazy.
money.
It's crazy. But
I mean, they had to get to the floor somehow. So
I guess. Maybe, anyways, but in return, they've added a big forward and not in the literal sense, a big forward in Evan Rodriguez. They added a couple D in Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Nico Mikkola, and Mike Riley.
Nico Mikkola big in the literal sense.
Big in the literal sense, and I think like a good little replacement of those 2 guys, Mike Riley and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I think those are 2 pretty decent cheap ads, and I like those dart throws for them, honestly. And they also
I
added
like Riley a lot more than Ekman-Larsson. I don't know. I guess I didn't watch him enough, but whatever.
I mean, just it could just be like one of those things where it's like a power play guy in case someone gets hurt, because Ekblad
Riley is a solid third pairing guy though. Like we got him at a good number. Stolarz too. Like he's a solid third goal. Like last season in Anaheim, he played pretty well. Just this past one, it's tough to play behind such a bad team. So as a third goalie, as insurance, it's a solid ad for 1.1. I like that signing of Anthony Stolarz.
Exactly.
Here's what I was taking a look at their pairings on daily faceoff because Montour and Ekblad suffered very big injuries in the playoffs. This is how their D shake out as of right now, according to daily faceoff. And I think could shake out for a decent amount of time because these are lengthy injuries. First pairing, Gustav Forsling, Josh Mahura. Second pairing, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Dmitry Kulikov. Third pairing, Nico Mikkola and Mike Riley.
Yeah, that's an issue.
Terrible.
There. That's really tough.
Horrible. That could potentially be the worst D-core in the Atlantic Division, in my opinion. How long they go with that, they have to go with that, will be seen.
I mean, yeah, because the one thing I'm worried about when listening to what like injury predictions are with hockey, at least, because I mean, for some reason we just get fed absolute bullshit information from these teams. Because if we look at Boston last year, Brad Marchand was supposed to be out to December. Who else was there? McAvoy was supposed to be January.
They were supposed to be. They're not going to be able to walk until Christmas, and then
November.
Marchand came back before American Thanksgiving. I'm like, what the hell is this? And they were playing well before that, anyways.
Exactly. So I mean, listen, they still have that strong. They still have a really strong forward group, the Florida Panthers here, and I think that's going to be their calling card, and that will help them out a lot. Like they still have Anton Lindell on that rookie deal, so that's helpful. Yeah. Adding Evan Rodriguez as like a winger / center who can. I mean, if there's a centerman injury, again, it's just they just have that depth. Like I said, that I don't think Tampa has. I don't think their high end talent is better, but I think that they have the organizational depth in the top 9 to really fill out those holes if anyone were to get hurt here. And again, like you said, they're starting behind the 8 ball. Do I see? I think I like them at plus 400 better, honestly, than the team above them right now and the team that we are going to talk about next. But do you like them in this situation right now? Do you like?
I like also Tampa more than them, and I like Boston more than them.
So you put them at the bottom of this little cluster here. Okay, interesting.
Like they got hot. Like they played some very good hockey from the second half of the season and onwards, and then into the playoffs as well. How is Ekblad going to look when he comes back? How is Brandon Montour going to look like when he comes back? How deep in the hole are they going to be before that? Like, I don't know. Like the forward group is okay. It's not bad. You got some players here for sure. But that D-core is just so bad. I don't know. Right.
It's definitely not good. I'll give you that. And like we were mentioning with cap hit, I think they have around $1 million in cap space. I don't think they have any LTIR players. I don't know how the player system.
I know it says right now that Ekblad is injured, Montour is injured, Kachuk is injured, but I think should be ready for the beginning of the season. I don't know that for sure though, because the last injury report I heard on Matthew Kachuk was that he's got a broken body.
Yeah, the broken sternum, broken
even trust himself. Brady has to wipe his ass for him.
Yeah, but I mean, again, like I personally like them. I think they have the best chance of this cluster. Maybe I'm just way off. It's them or the Lightning, I think, to win the division, other than the Leafs. But I think the team that's. Do you have anything else to say on the Florida Panthers?
Not really.
Okay,
I think Cinderella story is over for them.
fair enough. I could see. Yeah, we could see them definitely crash back down to earth because even though we could see them crash down to earth, I would still take both them and the Lightning over the next team that we're going to talk about right now. The Boston Bruins were plus 330 to win the division right now, right? And I mean, listen, if they don't have Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci, I actually think they might miss the playoffs. Honestly, I think that if those guys are not back for this team, I mean, look at it. Yeah. Look at the players that they've lost and the players that they brought in. The biggest pieces that they've brought in were Milan Lucic, James Van Riemsdyk, Morgan Geekie. Those are not substantial adds when you consider that they lost Patrice Bergeron, Tyler Bertuzzi. They traded away Taylor Hall. Nick Foligno, not that much of a loss. He got a really hot shooting bump. Maybe it actually helps them out losing him. Anyways, David Krejci and Dmitry Orlov. Those are some big pieces. And I understand that Bertuzzi and Orlov were not on the team to start the year, but you have to think they...
I guess
Hathaway as well. I don't know how I missed Hathaway as well. But I mean, a lot of the guys they signed were more in the like lower range. They didn't really make any big ads here. So I mean,
they couldn't. They have no cap space.
Exactly. And now they have the $4 million off their cap hit due to performance bonuses last year from Krejci and Bergeron. They went all in. I respect what they did, but this is now the ripple effect of them going all in. Right? They have $4 million gone from their cap as a result of doing that, right?
Sits right now, July 12th, 10:50 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Boston Bruins are apparently going about their business as if Krejci is not coming back, Patrice Bergeron is not coming back. So like let's timestamp that right there first.
Yeah, that is an important aspect because if those guys are back, they go back to being cup contenders. Listen, when you have those two, even though they're 35, 36, 37, 30, however old they are, 38, players. I think 39. Anyways, doesn't even matter. If you go from then to Charlie Coyle and Pavel Zacha or Morgan Geekie as your top three, I'm sorry, that's not going to cut it for me. And I know Zacha,
fourth line center, the mayor of Brampton, Patrick Brown.
And I know that they they had a good year last year, but I just don't think that Coyle and Zacha can hold up his top six seasons.
Also highest PDO in like history last year too. Like they just
exactly, and
they stopped every high danger chance and they scored on every high danger chance. It was actually a sight to be seen.
Exactly,
sorry for your ears on that one. Oh my god,
that's all good, but
piercing us. But as you mentioned, and rightfully so, the center depth is really, really bad on the Boston Bruins. However, I was looking at this and I was thinking the same thing, and I thought the same thing kind of last year too. I was like, the center depth is not good. I don't know how good this team's going to be. Blah blah blah. Like the forward depth, the forwards, like in terms of the wingers, Marchand, Pasternak, DeBrusque, that's solid, right? And then it falls off kind of there. Like their depth is not very good at forward. I'll give you that, right? The D pairings though,
yeah,
they still have Matt Grzelcyk, Charlie McAvoy. I can't believe I mentioned Matt Grzelcyk first on this damn decor. They have Charlie McAvoy, who's supposed to be paired with Matt Grzelcyk. They have Hampus Lindholm, who got a decent amount of Norris love last year too. And we know when you have two defensemen, you can put them on two different lines like that and play them as your horses. We know how effective that is. And Lindholm's paired with Brandon Carlo, who's a solid defense too. Third pairing, they have Forbort and Shattenkirk, who, I mean, I can mess with that as a third pairing there. I really like that decor. And then I guess they're going to bring back Ullmark and Swayman. That's a pretty good tandem right there. You're going to have to change up your systems a lot, but that could be a sneaky team.
It could be. My only pushback is they have $5 million. Like I wanted to get this before we go with the rest of it, but $5 million cap space likely to go to Jeremy Swayman, who's an unsigned RFA at the moment, along with Trent Frederic, who's also an unsigned RFA. But I look at this roster. I agree with you. Their D is really good, but how much better is their D than Tampa? I'd say maybe a small edge for the Boston Bruins here ahead of Tampa. But then you look at their forward group. I would and we talked about that they lack that depth. I would still much rather have that forward group just based off the top six pedigree of those players playing for Tampa. And I mean, goalies as well. Linus Ullmark, he had a fantastic year last year. Is he going to have a 940 save percentage again this year? Probably not. But if that 940 goes down to a 920 and Jeremy Swayman stays at a 920, those games, a lot of those games that they won would now eventually turn to losses because you're losing out on, again, good two-way players in
they set a record
Bergeron
last year
Krejci.
Also. Like
That's true. But I'm
not saying they're going to win the division, but they could be like I wouldn't blind myself with what's wrong with them. You have to remember what's also very strong with that team.
That's very fair. Yeah, very true. Yes, because they do have, again, they have Patrice Bergeron and they have
in terms
David
of the
Pastrnak and
in terms of the defense, I would rather have Boston's D over Tampa's.
Yes,
Tampa does have a strong D core. Hedman, Perbix is not a first pairing D, but he's there. Hedman, Perbix, Sergachev, Cernak, Calvin DeHaan, Zach Bogosian. But I would much rather have the old McAvoy, Hampus, Lindholm led defense.
Yes, but I agree. I agree with that, but I still think it's a small edge. I wouldn't say it's a massive chasm just because of the ability of Victor Hedman. You can kind of stick him with anyone and they can fly.
He's aging though.
That's true. That's true.
He's been on the decline. Last season wasn't Norris Trophy level. Like McAvoy was coming back from injury. He didn't have the greatest regular season or greatest season. He was pretty good, but I think he could come back after a full off season, being 100% healthy and look back to his normal self. Hampus Lindholm, as I mentioned, he played phenomenal last season. And then your third pairing's pretty suitable too. And on top of that, when we're looking at Hedman's with Perbix right now, McAvoy's with Grzelcyk, who's a decent defenseman, and Lindholm's with Carlo, who's a decent defenseman, right? So, yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty close. I do think it's pretty close between the Lightning and the Bruins. I'm lower on the Panthers. I know I shouldn't be as low as I am, but I'm lower on the Panthers. But you do bring up a good I'm not trying to play a little bit of devil's advocate here.
Yeah, fair enough.
Why the Bruins are that high? But who would I rather have, the Lightning or the Bruins right now? Probably the Lightning.
Fair enough.
But it's
fair
close.
Enough. Yeah, it's tough. And again, it's not like these are listen, the Bruins are higher, but if we're looking at strict implied probabilities, plus 330 translates to a 23.3% chance to win, right? Mm-hmm. So that they're saying that the Boston Bruins have a 23.3 chance to win the division, and the Tampa Bay Lightning have an 18.2. So we're only talking about 5 percentage points here. We're not talking about. I know it sounds like we're making a massive chasm, but I think it's only a 5% difference, and
on top of that, we still have to go through trade deadline. That's exactly huge too.
That's massive, and I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here. But again, it's just an early look. And finally, the last team, we haven't even touched on them, and we're not going to touch on them because you guys know everything about them already. It's the Leafs. They're plus 260 to win the division. They're obviously the favorites. What are we doing here? We know that they're the favorites. Taking a step back, though, is this the best chance the Leafs have to finish first in the division? I feel like it has to be, because I don't think they've ever been favored to win the division. I think this has to be. This is their. Were they? I don't think they were. I think the Bruins were, or maybe the Bruins weren't because they were injured.
They weren't. For sure they weren't. Because a lot of people were saying the Bruins even going to make the playoffs, and then a lot of the analytics people, I remember Dom Luszczyszyn said your best bet of the season is Bruins in the playoffs.
Yeah,
he had them. He was
all
very,
Bruins
very
overs. Yeah,
yeah. But in terms of last season, I remember once it started, that's when it was okay, the Leafs are going to be tough to win the division. Well, actually, once the season started, Boston, the Leafs started decently. So did Tampa, and the Leafs did not start very well. But as things got rolling, even when the Leafs were on that roll of 11-0-1, I think it was, or something like 11-1-1, they were still pretty far behind the Bruins. The Bruins played that well last year. I think this year, as you mentioned, yes, the Leafs, they have a very good chance at winning the Atlantic. However, the Atlantic is a lot more competitive this year than it has been in previous years. A lot more competitive.
And I think a big thing that we're going to see here is a lot of those, maybe, I don't want to call them layup games, but the games that you would get and easily take off take a win off those non-playoff teams.
Well, the Leafs would never win those anyways, so it doesn't matter.
You know what?
So now maybe we'll get a better record from it.
That's true.
Every time, like clockwork. Oh, it's a sleepy Tuesday. Time to get absolutely slapped by the last place Montreal Canadiens.
Here's the thing now, at least when it happens, when we lose to the Sabres, when we lose to the Senators, when we lose to the Red Wings, it's not going to feel as bad because they've improved a bit. So before we get out of here, I think we've covered pretty much everything. But before we get out, I want to get your prediction for how the division will shake out. 1 through 8, who you got. I'll start and give you some time to think about it because I didn't really prep you for this.
Go.
But for me, I would have the Leafs, I would have the Lightning, I would have the Panthers, I would have the Bruins. So that's the top 4 there. And then I would go Sabres, Red Wings, Senators, Habs. Not crazy. And you probably could have guessed that listening through this, but that's the shakeup I'd go with.
Okay. I would go Leafs, obviously. Leafs, Lightning. I'd go Sabres. Bruins wildcard spot.
Okay.
And then Panthers. And then I think that actually I'd go Sens and then Panthers. And then Red Wings, Habs.
So Dave's got you drinking the Kool-Aid, eh? No, whatever. Yeah. Again, we're doing this on July 12th.
July. I don't know.
There's so many moving
prep me
parts.
At all.
It's all good.
I don't know. I kind of believe it, but I'd have to take a deeper look into it.
I like it, but this is July 12th. Like, we're doing this early, and maybe we'll revisit this when we're close to the season after all the dominoes have fallen. Because again, the Leafs are going to have
some good free agents out there.
Some good free agents, and the Leafs have to losing players for sure. Who they're losing, who knows? But they cannot go into the year $9 million over the cap. They're losing someone. They would also. I think they'd have to. Yeah. No, they'd only have to lose Matt Murray. What am I saying? Anyways, I think that's it for us, right?
Yeah, that's all I got for a July day.
Pretty much. So just want to remind everyone to, if you stayed this long, we appreciate you guys. Let us know that you stayed this long. Let us know what you would have the division play out 1 through 8. Comment it below. We'll respond to your comments, and we appreciate you guys getting this far. So leave a like and subscribe if you like the content. So we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for listening.
Go Leafs, go.